I just sold an almost $1 million stock portfolio. Now, I don't typically make videos like this, but I thought it'd be valuable to explain why I sold, what I'm doing with all the money, and how you can use this information to make more money. This should be super valuable. So let's start with what I sold. Most recently, I sold all my stocks, but this is part of a larger asset selling spree, if you will, that's been going on for like 6 months in my life. I recently sold my moving and storage business, which could be a whole video in itself. Super interesting, tons of lessons learned there. I'm selling a rental house right now, and I just sold all my individual stocks with just a couple small exceptions. Me and stocks, we've had an interesting relationship over the last decade plus. I was obsessed with stocks about 10 years ago, but at that time I was too broke to really make much money from stocks. You need significant capital to make a significant return without crazy risk within the stock market. I was obsessed with stocks, and I realized you need money to make money here. And if I wanted to get heavily into stocks, I needed to first, make a bunch of money. Kind of an obvious realization, but it took me a while to realize that at the time. That's when I started a variety of businesses, and those businesses did extremely well for me. And during that time, it didn't really make sense to invest in stocks. I could get a 9% return in the stock market, or I could get a 200% return by reinvesting into my own businesses. So I chose my own businesses. I didn't even have a Roth IRA or anything like that because it just did not make sense to invest a single dollar to anything except for my own businesses. Eventually, though, I had more cash than what made sense to keep reinvesting into those businesses. I needed to start pulling some cash, and that's when I started buying other assets like houses, stocks, crypto, things like that. But even at that point, I was buying far more crypto than stocks and getting a far better return from crypto. But despite that, I still loved analyzing stocks, the logic behind it, and I built a decent portfolio of around $750,000. That's the portfolio that I just sold. See you later. It's gone. And I was doing pretty well with it. Here are some investments that I was particularly proud of within this portfolio because I analyzed those stocks, I spent significant time on it, and I picked them well. That's Coinbase, up 29%, Palantir, 43%. Many of these I made videos on, and I told you about all my research before I even made the investment myself. Steve Madden Shoes, a 96% gain. Nucor, up 307%. That was amazing. Now, I'll show you what I'm buying with this cash in a minute, because first, what stocks did I keep? Just 3 out of maybe 30 positions I actually kept. Those are the S&P 500, Berkshire Hathaway, and a mystery one I'll tell you in a second because you're not going to believe it. Here's the thought process. I kept about $100,000 in the S&P 500 index fund, and the simple reason there is I just wanted some kind of exposure to the market that I just didn't have to think about. I think it's important to just have something in the market because the market, they say it matches, the state of reality. I don't really think that's the case. I think it more matches the reality of, the upper class, and the upper class tend to make quite a bit of money. So I kept a position there. I also kept about $45,000 in Berkshire Hathaway stock. And the reason here is I think of Berkshire Hathaway as a kind of more targeted index fund. They're so massive that you essentially get exposure to the entire economy, but that exposure is through a particular lens. That lens is what Warren Buffett thinks is the best of the best within the economy. And if you look at history, that dude, he just nails it. Time and time again, I'm happy to have some money parked with him in Berkshire Hathaway. And again, that's just a position that I don't have to think about. Just buy it and forget it. And it's just kind of a cool company to own. From the very beginning, Warren Buffett was kind of like an investing idol for me. I studied him, researched him. I really appreciate how he goes about the stock market. And then we have the third stock that I kept, which is Aflac, the insurance company with the duck. But why? They're a decent company these days, but they're not really anything to care too much about, to be honest. So why would I bother keeping any position here? Well, it's sentimental. It's that simple. That's the first stock I ever bought. I spent literal weeks researching that company, first filtering down companies, picking that one, researching that company, validating it, listening to all the earnings reports, going through the finances. That was the first time I really rigorously looked into investments within the stock market. I did all of that before making a $300 investment. And that was a ton of money at the time for me. So that was my very first stock. When I was doing this selling spree, I was like, I can't sell that. It was $300 also, whatever. So I thought it'd be cool just to keep that. And, maybe 10 years from now, that'll be cool just to look at, see whatever it's at. I mean, it's doing pretty well right now. It's up 162%, so I picked well on it. It was kind of cool. It's a relic, if you will, within my portfolio. Now, this leads us to the next big questions. Why did I do this? Why did I sell everything? And what did I do with all the money? Is it a market problem, the reason why I decided to sell everything? Is it some kind of panic response? What's going on here? Well, if you look at the market, we are at all-time highs in various big indexes like the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. And I'm not going to lie, that is a bit concerning to me. I don't think that accurately reflects reality right now. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that reflects maybe the reality of the upper class, but not like the average person. And I think there probably will be some kind of convergence there. Like on one hand, there's no doubt that the economy is better now than it was a year ago. If we think about a year ago, 1 to 2 years ago, people were in a bit of a panic. Like we didn't know if the whole economy was just going to collapse, in a month or two. Inflation was just going up and up and up every single month, every single quarter. There was an extreme amount of uncertainty. Now that's eased up a bit. Like perceptions are quite a bit better. The reality is a little bit better, but I still think that there's a mismatch. I think the market is being too optimistic for the reality of what's going on with the average person in their day-to-day life. I mean, people still just aren't spending money quite like they are in good times, with the exception of heavy spending on debt, which is a whole concern within itself. But really just people aren't spending that much. People aren't taking as many risks, and there are far fewer businesses even being started. A perfect example or perfect point here that aids in my conclusion is, so I've had a moving and storage business for almost a decade, recently sold it, but through that business, I was constantly buying and selling box trucks. Well, as part of this sale, I was left with a couple box trucks that I needed to sell. In any year in the past 10 years, I would have sold those in like a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's a hot commodity. A lot of different businesses and people need box trucks. Well, these trucks, I've been sitting on them. Like, they are priced at 50% below market value. No one wants them. That's a sign to me that things aren't quite where they need to be. And then I also have a rental property that's for sale, tons of tours, tons of interest, but not that many serious buyers. It's in Chandler, Arizona. If you're interested in buying a property, I'll put a link in the description. I can't remember the exact price. It's like $750,000 for this property. But if you ask me, it feels like this market, the stock market, is higher than it probably should be. But is that the reason why I decided to sell everything? No. When it comes to investing decisions, I really try not to put too much weight into how I feel about the market in my investing decisions, because you just never really know. Individual companies, you might know a little bit more, but like the entire market, you just don't really know. The real reason I'm selling is for focus. Let me tell you a story here. I hit kind of a breaking point about 9 months ago. I realized that I was just thinking about way too many things, and I realized something needed to change. So here's what I did. I hit this kind of breaking point, and I decided I'm gonna write a list of every single thing that I'm currently concerned about. Now, that could be a business offering. It could be an entire business itself. It could be some asset that I've been meaning to sell, some problem that I've been meaning to solve. I did this whole list. I had 53 items on that list, and many of those were like income generating activities that, I had someone working on it. I had something going on there, and that is just way too many things to think about. Once I put it down on a list, I was like, what am I doing? And the reason for that is I've just kind of operated the last, 13 years of my business life under this idea that bring it on. The more the merrier. I could handle anything. I'll take it all on. And I did handle it pretty well, but I hit a point where, not to sound big-headed, but it's like I have what I want. Realistically, I could make 10 times more money and my life would get 1% better. That's the truth. So I hit this point where it's why am I doing all of this stuff, especially the things that don't move the needle? Why am I spending even an ounce of effort on something that realistically isn't even 10% of the bigger things within my life? So I just went down that list and I just started crossing things off. And certain things were super easy, where it's here's this thing that takes a couple hours a week that, makes me just a little bit of money. See you later. That's gone. Crossing things off. Just to really, really narrow that focus on just a few core things. I highly recommend this. If you're one of those people who's I'm an entrepreneur, I have 7 businesses. Let me be honest with you. The people who become billionaires typically aren't the people who have 7 businesses. Typically, they focus on one thing, they're obsessed about it. Maybe they focus on 2 things, or it's one big thing and kind of a side hobby. And that's really what I'm trying to do. Focus intensely on just a few things, and the stock market is part of that. I had this stock market portfolio where maybe I did some major diligence on a stock 2 years ago, but I wasn't being the investor that I needed to be, checking into every single earnings report, listening to every single conference call. I just wasn't doing those things, and me doing those things didn't even make sense because that wouldn't give me a big enough return to even merit the time. So why am I invested in all of these things that I'm just not going to spend the time into, doing it properly? If you're gonna do something, do it right. And I wasn't fully doing that right. So cross off everything, all of those stocks that I just wasn't doing right, dramatically simplify, put that cash into something that does make sense, which I'll talk about in a second, and life will get easier. I'll be able to narrow focus. This has been massive for me in the last 9 months as I'm crossing things off. And guess what? The things that I am focusing on are getting better and better and better and seeing massive results, and things are going great. All of this crossing things off, that's gonna let me focus on fewer things. My business, content, and kind of behind the scenes. We've been doing some massive things there that, the results have been insane. And then crypto, being able to focus on my portfolio there, investing into small projects, researching small projects. And I really kind of see that as my hobby, where I make the real money with my business. I take some of that money, put it into crypto, make videos on those things. I really don't put like a massive amount of pressure on it. Of course, I want to make a great return, and I'm not wasting money. I'm not throwing it around. That's my focus, my business and my crypto portfolio. My life has gotten dramatically better. And this brings me back to where I put all the money that used to be in stocks. Again, super simple. I asked myself 2 questions. Do I need the money right now? And what kind of return do I want? Well, really, I didn't need the money. It was just sitting in the stock market anyways. And really, it was just kind of a risk in the stock market because it could go down 20% in the next year. Even in the S&P, it could go down 20, 30% potentially. Do I need the money right now? No. And what kind of return do I want? Well, really, I just wanted to preserve my capital, and a small return would be great. And luckily, interest rates are pretty good right now. So I just took that cash, put it into 1-year CDs at either 5.25 or 5.35% interest. That's great. I'll take that. And there you go. That's it. Simple. My life just got a whole lot simpler. I don't even have to think about this portfolio, and I'm making a decent return, like a 5% return, essentially risk-free, basically risk-free. Who can complain? Now, how can you use this information? I kind of touched on this briefly, but this is a lot of people, especially men. You have this mentality that you can take on anything, and maybe you can. That's great if you can, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should. I find myself falling in this trap time and time again, where I just take on things. The world will give you up to your limit of what you will tolerate. Every single time, whether that's good or bad. So you really want to be able to take a step back and go, what do I really want to focus on, and what really moves the needle? And if you can just focus on those things, your life will get so much better. It makes such a massive difference. So that's how you can use this information. I hope that was valuable, and I hope you have a profitable day.